Hey, this is Aida with Love Built Life. My goal is to help you live your life from the heart. So, as you know, I'm already in a series of sewing videos. So, this is the next video in the series, and it's going to be about how do you cut out your patterns. Okay, so just give me a moment while I switch the camera. So, here I have laid out. I actually have this mat. This mat board is for rotary cutting. It'll say rotary mat on it if you're interested in buying one. I've had this one forever, so I'm sorry if it's, kind of, used and worn. But this is great for rotary cutting. The reason I have this on here now is, even though I'm not using a rotary cutter, I will be using regular scissors, is that I am cutting this on my bed. So when you're in small spaces, this is a great way to be able to use your bed without actually cutting into your fabric. You're cutting into your bedspread, which I have done in the past. So this is the pattern that we've been working on. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you that when you open up this pattern, we talked about this before, that inside is this little booklet. And then there's also going to be the actual pattern pieces themselves. Sometimes it'll be one sheet, sometimes it'll be 2 or 3, depending on how much fabric it's actually going to use and need to be cut out. But let's talk about the actual booklet itself. So when you open this booklet, it's going to tell you exactly what pieces are in your pattern. So this lets me know that there are 11 pieces in this pattern. It's also going to tell me what do I need for the particular dress that I want to do. So remember, we talked about I want to do this particular dress right here or right here, and we learned where to find that in the back. So I want to do with the little cap sleeve here, I want to do the longer version, which is dress A. So if I look on the book itself, you can see here it says bodice from front A and B, bodice back A and B. So I'm going to definitely need pattern piece 1 and 2. Side front A, B, C, and D means that I'm going to need piece 3. Back A, B, C, and D means I'm going to need piece 4. Elastic guide for A, B, C, and D, I will need piece 5. And then keep going, front, neck, and so forth. But you see here on piece 8, it says bodice front C and D. Since I'm not doing that dress right now, I don't need those pieces. I recommend cutting them out anyway and keeping them safe in case later on you decide you want to make that dress. But for now, that's all we need. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that what it looks like when we open this up. So these are some general directions that are going to start telling you what to be looking for on the pattern pieces themselves, and I'll show you these when we get there. These symbols here, what they mean and why you need to look for those symbols. Also here, for beginners, I wouldn't worry about this too much, but this shows you how you can adjust the pattern to be longer, shorter, wider, whatever it is that you need. And then also the cuttings and the markings. We are going to talk about how you do the cuttings and the markings as well. And then they will also continue, they'll have special notes for you, things that you may want to know. And then it will teach you the step-by-step. And we'll go over that when it's time. But for now, we're going to talk about the actual pattern pieces themselves. So when you open up your pattern, and it's going to be folded up, it'll be folded in its own way. You're going to open it up all the way, and this one is not as large, but sometimes they're very large, especially if you're trying to make a coat or a wedding dress. In the beginning, I would start with something small, just so you got comfortable with your machine and got comfortable with the patterns. But absolutely, you can make a gown, and a lot of them nowadays are very simple. So going back to what we were discussing before about these symbols, and I don't know if you can see that here on this pattern piece. I'm trying my best so you guys can see. You see this line right here? It is an arrow going up and down. And when I share later on about picking your fabrics, we're going to talk about selvage. And there are selvage and grain. So there is a grain to a fabric, whether it goes up or down, the long way or crosswise. That particular symbol means, sorry, I have a fan on, so it's blowing this. That particular symbol means that you need to keep this longwise on the grain. And I will show you what that means. Sorry. I will show you what that means on the pattern piece. Okay. Okay, so I switched views and I also turned off the fan that was blowing my pattern all over the place. So let's go back to the pattern here. So if you take a look here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a piece of whiteboard underneath here. And when I mentioned the rotary cutter earlier, you could just use a hard piece of board. If you don't need a rotary cutter, you just need something to make sure that your scissor does not go through, because you think you're going to know when you're cutting through fabric and when you're cutting through your bedspread, but that's not always the case. I actually cut through a carpet once without realizing it. Okay, so anyway, let's go back to the pattern. So here you go. This line here, like I said, we're going to talk about the grain of the fabric, following the grain. So this means that this needs to go along the grain. It will let you know if you need to go through the crosswise grain, but this one is actually through the grain, and we'll talk about that later on. You also see these extra lines here, right? So I'm going to bring this up so you can see better. These extra lines here actually are the pattern sizes. So this is a 14 through a 22, and it's going to show you this is the line where you need to cut. So you want to make sure that you're following this line, because this line will also let you know where you need to cut all the way up to make sure that you're getting the right size in the armhole. This particular piece right here is a bodice piece. So this is for the top. This is for C and D. So I don't need this particular one. I'm just using this as an example. These little notches here, I'm going to show you when I cut this out how I take care of these little notches. These are important because these help you to match those pattern pieces together. Later on, when we talk about marking the pattern, this is another piece that's going to be important, but this doesn't get cut out. This is just something we're going to mark later on. This is a single notch. This is a double notch. Okay. And then this particular one, you see where the arrow is connected all the way. It'll continue. But it's an arrow that shows that it needs to be on the fold, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. So this is the bodice piece for C and D, and this is the bodice back. So the bodice back does not have a zipper or anything, so this will be cut on the fold. And as you can see, this arrow goes like this, it goes over and comes like this. This lets me know that this needs to be cut on the fold. The other thing to know on the pattern pieces themselves, it will tell you to cut one. As you can see on this one, it says cut one on the fold. So when you open this up, this will be the entire back. On some of the other ones, it will say cut two. So let's turn this around. So the other piece that we were looking at earlier actually says cut two. So cut two pieces. Because this one is not being cut on the fold, you will need two pieces to make the two pieces that make the front of your bodice. The other thing, it also gives you the measurements again, as we saw that were in the booklet. What other things you'll find on here? It tells you bodice front for C and D. So remember, going back to that little booklet, what do we need? What are we looking for? We're looking for pieces A and B, because I'm doing dress A. So this particular one I don't need. And some of them you may only have one piece or one pattern piece for a particular outfit or dress. It also lets you know here what is the seam allowance. You're going to need to know this, because when you put the pattern pieces together, it's going to tell you how much of this you can use up in seam allowance, and that's that little edge when you're sewing, and we'll talk about that when we actually get to the sewing part. The total ease on the above measurement is approximately 4 inches. Ease lets me know that when I'm sitting, when you sit, you have what's called spread. The bigger you are, the more the spread. So this lets me know that I have 4 inches of spread, so that if I sit down and my body spreads 4 inches, my dress is not going to pop open. It actually will have plenty of room for me to move around in. It also tells me the sizes for this here, the pattern piece. So if you misplace your pattern pieces and don't put them away, you know, this is Simplicity 8231 for the sizes, and then you can make sure that you put all your pattern pieces back together. Now notice this here on this edge is 7/8 inch seam allowance. That's almost an inch of seam allowance that's allowed on this bottom edge to connect the top to the bottom. However, if you look over here, there's only a 3/8 inch seam allowance around the rest of this pattern. And that's because here, if you see again, 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you notice, you're going to need more seam allowance on the two pieces that connect the top to the bottom, because you're going to put more wear and tear. So you want to make sure that you have more room for this to move around. Okay, so let's talk about actually cutting the pattern. So when I cut my pattern pieces, the first thing I do, first of all, you want to use your scissors. You can use paper scissors for this particular part, but you will need your fabric scissors when you're actually cutting the pattern with the fabric. But for this, you could just use paper scissors. These are my fabric scissors. This paper is okay to do it with. So what I do is I just kind of generally cut out the patterns loosely at first, not in any no precision on this part, just to get them away from each other. Otherwise they'll tear. So I cut it out loosely and then set it to the side. I want to also show you that sometimes you will see additional things on your pattern. For example, this will let you know that this is a multi-size pattern. This is the measurements, how you would measure yourself using your ruler. This is bust, waist, hips. So it's easy ways to fit your pattern. Again, if you're just a beginner, I would just do it straight and then figure out from there. We're just going to talk about doing just cutting the pattern as is. And that's generally what I do anyway. If I want to make adjustments, I make them later. But this is just extra information. This is something you don't need. It's just for your information. So again, I just loosely cut these out. Now you could do this laying it flat. You want to make sure it's kind of flat, because if you've never done this before, it's very easy to cut into the wrong thing. So I just kind of loosely cut these out. Until I have all my pattern pieces relaced from the pattern.